Is there such a thing as bad art? I've had this conversation on Twitter, and there's some people that very, very aggressively defend that there is no such thing as bad art. It's all subjective. Well, let's talk about that. Hey there, this is Perch. So art. This is a topic where, first off, I just want to say this is going to come down to kind of a personal call, and there's nothing wrong with that, and there's not a one size fits all answer. And so, at no point during this video or during my commentary should you assume I'm telling you what to think or supplanting your idea. Your idea is your idea. I respect that. But on the subject of art, um, there's a lot of talk right now in particular with the big publishers, and in particular Marvel, the big publishers, that there's a lot of art that, quote unquote, wouldn't pass quality. And people say things like, this wouldn't have passed in Jim Shooter's days, or various things. And I think that's, by the way, there was bad art. Well, see, I'm jumping to a conclusion, but there was art that was not of good quality back in the Jim Shooter days. There absolutely was. We have memories of kind of John Byrne X-Men and Frank Miller Daredevil, and we have memories. The things that we remember are the really great issues, and they were really great in big part because of the art. We don't remember the garbage issues that were the fill-ins that had, very strangely rendered, cheap looking animation. There was cheap animation. There absolutely was, and that is they're there. They're out there. You can find them. It's not like they just now started to exist. The difference is that, knock on wood, generally speaking, although you would get the occasional oddball issue, if you picked up the core titles, the titles that were the big ones that were selling really well, there was more of a desire to do top level art. Didn't fully escape it. You can look at there's some X-Men issues during that run where they needed to fill in between John Romita Jr. or Alan Davis or John Byrne doing issues. You'd see these fill in every now and then. You get one where it's like the characters look really super bizarre, and not, nobody would say it was good. If it was printed today, people would be all over it for the quality. But generally speaking, they kept things, higher end. And I also want to point out, and this is kind of important for the quote unquote the creators or the publishers or the defenders, not the comic team, but the people who are defending this stuff to understand, is bad art, or art that people thought was bad, getting roasted, is not a new phenomenon. The only thing that's new is that Twitter is in the mix and social media, and these comments can more quickly be posted. But you can go into a comic shop in the 80s, 90s, aughts. You can go in there, and people were roasting that art. If you can go onto the Usenet back in the 90s, and people were roasting that art. There were comic book forums on AOL forums where people would roast uh, issues that had bad art, and just as cruel as today. I mean, they're no different. There's some new terms. We're more hopped up on calling people various sexual insults, but you go back to the 90s, and you would get people saying all kinds of nasty things. It's not This is not a new phenomenon that's happened, and I think if people could remember that, it would help us all, especially the people online who feel like there's this new wave of social media trolls. And I blame the news. I mean, the news is trying to portray this all like, hey, there's this new phenomenon that's happening. It's internet trolls. It's not new, not new at all. Um, so volume higher, sure. Tools make it easier for people to rip on things, absolutely. But the behavior is not new. And I think if you realize it's not new, I think then you have a much better chance of actually solving it or coming up with a solution, rather than try and assume that suddenly in the last 2 years, because a particular president was elected, suddenly there's online trolls. I do like how we're hearing less about bots, by the way. There's less of the Russian bot kind of thing that you hear. That's become old now. We're onto there's secret legions of underground white Nazi incels out there. You don't have You don't have the bots. The bots is that's yesterday's news. So that's good. Um, that said, by the way, has anybody did anybody read this story or was following it where Microsoft produced an AI? I don't remember the name. It wasn't Cortana, but it was they produced an AI that was going to kind of chat with people on social media, and with in like I think 12 hours, less than 24 hours, but I think in 12 hours, the bot, which was basically reading all the tweets that were out there and analyzing them, basically using it to create a persona for itself, turned into a crazy racist, actual legit racist, like kind of hate anti-Semite, talking about bad Jews and things. Like in less than 12 hours, the AI turned to completely evil. Um, I don't know. I find that hilarious. If you didn't see that story, you should look that up. There's some very important lessons on there. News when they covered it, they're like, oh, this seems ominous and weird that an AI studying human behavior immediately turned to this like in a rapid amount of time. It seems a little weird, but hey, funny story. A cat's up in a tree in Dayton, Ohio. Let's go over that. I mean, I don't know. I think that's a story people ought to pay attention to. It's when the Terminator robots come, we're getting a little peek into how they're going to behave. Anyway, um, be that as it may, bad art. I think that there is subjectively bad art, and I know it's every snowflake is beautiful in its own little way, but I think there's also human anatomy, and if you're an artist and you're drawing the head bigger than the torso, and in one panel, and in the next panel the head is small and back to normal size, but the arm is super big, and the character we're talking about is not the leader or Reed Richards or Plastic Man. If it's not a character who's supposed to have their body do that, then you can make an argument this is bad art. And I mean, you could have like beautifully rendered a picture, but if the job is draw Spider-Man and you draw Spider-Man, completely out of proportion with giant legs, tiny head, big arm, and a cape, then you're not that is bad art. You have failed in the job. You'd say, oh, well, that person's giving their own impression of Spider-Man. Uh, okay, but it's still bad art because uh, there's a defined way Spider-Man looks, and he needs to look that way. You may say, well, why? Why does he need to look that way? Because that's how the character is created. That's why. It's not. This isn't design the character any way you feel like on any given day. It's there's a way Spider-Man is drawn. But anyway, um, I think that and this came up recently with an issue of the Avengers. There's if you look at that issue, there's a scratchy kind of style. Okay, it looks rough and unfinished, but you can make the argument, hey, so does Frank Miller's stuff at various times. And by the way, Frank Miller, legendary artist in a lot of ways. You look at his style. You look at like how he rendered kind of Ray Palmer and Wonder Woman in the recent Dark Knight 3 and some of the more recent issues he's done. The characters look odd, and he's at least drawing with a consistent style. So one of the things I think you can identify between I don't like this art versus this is bad art is if from panel to panel the characters radically change in shape and form, and one here they're rendered with a full mustache, and the next panel they're rendered with a pencil mustache, and over here they've got tons of muscles and then no muscles, and just I think that kind of randomness panel to panel is bad art. I think you can officially say bad art. I think there's people who like there's people who like Jim Lee. There's people who don't. There's people who like Joe Madureira. There's people who don't. There's people who like Frank Miller's art. And there's people who don't. There's you have personal preferences of style. And the other thing that gets mixed up in this a lot is the character sexy? And I think that is a different, completely different topic. I think that you can look at Phil Nato and you can say, I don't like this art. I don't like how the women don't look busty or whatever. You can say that because he tends to draw, I'd say, more petite, or women who are not super giant up top, and that's kind of his style, and that's okay. That is Kevin Wada, another one. The they draw consistently though. You look panel to panel. You look at the perspective. You look at placement of how characters are on the panel. And you might say, I don't like this art style, but I think you couldn't convince me anyway that it's bad art, because it is sound. It is structurally sound. I remember when Michael Mignola was kind of coming into his own and more fans were discovering, there were a lot of people who said, this is ugly art. This isn't art I like. It's ugly. And I remember having this conversation back then of, hey, heavy shading, kind of more of a blocky character style, some different things going on. Absolutely. We can make you could say, this isn't for me. I don't like it. This style doesn't appeal to me. It's ugly, so to speak, for me. You could say that. But again, you go panel to panel, and what do you see? You see consistency in the characters. You see that the characters rendered in proper perspective. You can see that the panel design is such that the story flows from one place to another. You can see that the character doesn't lose a leg in one panel, like the recent Avengers issue where there's a character and then like there's a panel where the leg is kind of supposed to be behind something, but the perspective's all off, so it just looks like the leg is gone. And this is, that there's such a thing as bad art. I don't think it's completely subjective. I think there is, not understanding the foundations of drawing. And look, if you stuck around to the video this far, there is this kind of back and forth where Richard Meyer in his videos was kind of roasting art of, this looks like trash art. And in some cases, there was examples of it looking actually, structurally bad, and usually he would point out those things. Full disclosure, I have not seen a lot of videos, and not in a long time, but I remember, him kind of moving the camera in and showing a panel, and like its perspective's all out of whack, and he's kind of saying this should be over here. And I think that's legitimate criticism, and I think you can say this is bad art. But then in response, I remember Gail Simone or somebody got a copy of Iron Sights, and the artist there, I cannot remember the guy's name, and they're pointing out panels like, look, this is also out of perspective, and the hands over here, and this art is bad. And there were some panels that were out of perspective, and things were off. And you can say that's a bad panel. But both sides kind of argued with each other of like, hey, you can't call this bad. This is, and I think that it's just a useless argument. You like the art or you don't. And that's one criteria. That's great. And then there's the other hand where there's just kind of sloppy bad rendering, like this issue of Avengers. I'm sure the person who drew it's a wonderful person, and I think as a human being, great. But the renderings of that page, the art, the panels, the characters, everything else, there were some real fundamental problems. And if you look at Iron Sights again, and I ordered a couple copies for people, they aren't. Let's see, how do I want to put this? The art didn't appeal to me, but the art was consistent. And some people are like, oh, no, it wasn't. No, it actually was. You may not like the style, but it's consistent. And I think that is very different from somebody where, the art, you don't like the style and it's not consistent and it changes and random problems happen from panel to panel. I think, I go back to the Mignola example. It's okay. I think Mignola is a legend, but there's a lot of people who don't. And, I'm not going to call those people stupid. What appeals to them appeals to them. But there's two levels. This is not good. I'm beating a dead horse at this point. But I don't like the way this style looks. And holy crap, why is this character, dramatically changing shape from panel to panel? I think those are two very different things. And in terms of critiques, as I mentioned with the example of I think a Squirrel Girl is one that I don't remember. I think again, Erica Henderson, not a fan of that style. But as you've seen different artists come on to Squirrel Girl, one thing about Henderson that is true is the artist consistent. The perspective is there. The character has the same face from this panel to the next panel. May not like the face. I'm not a fan of how the kind of the odd expressions. I'm just not a fan of it. But it's consistent, and that if I can't have perfect art I love, I at least want art that looks like it's consistent and the artist is caring about what they're trying to do. So that's my opinion. What's yours? What's art? I'd love your examples from you. What's art you don't like, but you would admit it's actually it's sound art. It's a style you don't like, but the artist is not bad. It's just style you don't like. What are some examples for you? What are some examples of just stuff that just looks bad, is bad? You can say, mechanically, structurally, scientifically, however you want to put it, that there are big issues. Let me know in the comments below. Would love to learn about what you think. Like, subscribe, hit the bell for notification. Follow me on Twitter at Comic Perch, and thanks for listening.